Hello, good morning. How are you doing? Hope y'all are having a great day. I am Burke, and you're watching Road Odyssey. I hope y'all are doing great. This video has blossomed out of my curiosity about some of the back roads that I enjoy taking. And here in Texas, a lot of these back roads in kind of southern Oklahoma, where I drive a lot, they are signified by Texas Lake Trails, Texas Forest Trails, and they're park roads and that kind of jazz. So I thought, well, I'll kind of look into this and see where they all came from. And really, there's a pretty good history behind all this, and it begins back in at least 1864 with Abraham Lincoln, involving Yosemite Park, which it kind of went through a few phases. So just so I don't babble too much, let's go ahead and kind of get into the history of some of these roads that we love and enjoy to drive on.
In 1864, President Abraham Lincoln signed an act of Congress that prevented any private ownership of the lands that are now known as the Yellowstone National Park. In 1872, the Yellowstone National Park was established as the first park or pleasure ground for the benefit and employment of the people. John Muir wrote and had published over 300 magazine articles and 12 books detailing the increased worry of overusing resources and destroying the natural habitats and beauty of our finest areas. He is referred to as the father of the national parks due to his work in Yosemite. Muir's writings convinced the U.S. government to protect Yosemite. Then Sequoia in 1890, Grand Canyon in 1908, and Mount Rainier in 1899 as national parks. His ideas led to the creation of the National Park Service in 1916.
Now that these parks were beginning to be established and advertised, people were flocking to them. Train, steamboat, horse and buggy. So this is still around 1900, 1909, 1916, all up and through there. And there was still some industry, at least outliers in these areas as well, that needed to be brought under control. So this meant the government had to begin establishing roads and where routes were going to be for the trains and all that jazz. So here's just a few clips to give you a feel for a little bit of what was going on up until about the 1920s and 30s.
Between 1890 and 1909, the Grand Canyon was still being mined, and there were some very notable people, and like the Santa Fe Railroad, who had trails all through that area that ultimately ended up being used for future roads by the National Park Service. Here's an example of a train that took people to a California state park. Buggy rides were often available at the state parks for the visitors. With the increased popularity of the automobile, roads had to be improved and built throughout all of these parks. The evolution of scenic roads and byways throughout the nation were identified for development and preservation by the 1920s. Scenic road efforts starting in the 1930s began with the Winchester County Parkways and the Mount Vernon Memorial Highway. In 1954, U.S. Congress appropriated funds for a federal study on the Great River Road that runs along the Mississippi River from Minnesota to the Gulf of Mexico. 3,000 miles of federal, state, and county roads. In 1962, President Kennedy established the Recreation Advisory Council. In 1964, this council recommended the development of national scenic roads and parkways. In the early 1960s, the Outdoor Recreation Resources Review Commission, chaired by Lawrence Rockefeller, concluded that the nation's recreational patterns were being transformed dramatically by the expanding population, increased leisure time, greater mobility, and growing affluence. Further illustration of how people really loved automobiles and wanted to get out and investigate the world around them. In 1985, President Reagan established the Commission on Americans Outdoors. This commission published findings in 1987, and the report included 3 recommendations. Local and state governments should create a network of scenic byways and take action to protect the natural resources. Then the U.S. Congress should establish an incentive program of matching grants from the Highway Trust Fund to encourage scenic byway designation, development, and protection. Lastly, private sector and government partnerships should provide information on scenic byways. All right, I found this website via Google. American Scenic Byways Map is what I did a search on, and it came up with this website, scenicbyways.info. And I am illustrating here how the website works. So this is the main page. You click on the state that you're interested in. I did Texas, and it came up with the scenic byways. Basically, I chose the forest trails, and it gave me the region and roads to drive. So that was pretty cool. I went back to the main page. Arkansas came up with its main roads, of which I've driven some of these. Great River Bend, because I had not gone on that road before. I don't believe. I think I've driven part of this. Yeah. All right, zoomed in on it. Back on the Texas, some of the Texas roads. And this is just some of the signs that I see very often throughout my area. Over these next film clips, I'm going to recap the history of the coming of our nation's scenic roads. From the 1860s to the 1890s, we began establishing our parks. From the 1890s to the 1930s, we began routing paths for the roads off of the pre-existing trails and railway paths. We began linking historical monuments, opening up the veins to parks in a methodical manner, and protecting these areas from further destruction. From the 1930s to the 1960s, we began establishing cohesive legislation, laws, through which much research had been utilized to develop quality scenic byways. From the 1980s to the present, we furthered the protection of resources, more funding methodologies for federal, state, and local governments, development and implementation of systems regarding these byways.
Hey, well, thank you so much for watching this video and getting through another piece of history of our roads. It was really fun to do, a lot of research, and just like some of my other little history videos, it's not going to be perfect, but it gives you the idea of the routes of some of these roads. And if you have problems with some of your scenic highways and byways and back roads, you could probably talk to your local commissioner, and you know, they're usually pretty easygoing guys. At least they are here in Texas. So talk to your commissioners and see if they can't get some of these roads fixed up or why they are not being maintained. So anyway, y'all take it easy, and I will see you later. Bye.